I'm Ryan. I'll introduce myself. I started this company with some friends called Material Security. We protect Google and Microsoft accounts. We work with everybody cool, and I love my job, and it's really tiring but really fun. And as part of this adventure over the years, I've encountered two very special people who have also made similarly concerning life decisions in the past about entrepreneurship. And I am very happy to welcome them to this Zoom here today. May I introduce Mr. Zane Lackey and Mr. Haroon Meer. You guys want to introduce yourselves and just kind of run through your background for those of you who have not recently perused your LinkedIn. And then kind of what inspired you, what your company was, companies, if you're a serial one of these, and kind of how you got started in the first place. Just take a microphone, please.
Haroon, do it, man.
So I'm Haroon. I'm from Thinkst. We make the Thinkst Canary. So I used to do network security stuff at the university. I started working while I was a student. Then I spent about 10 years as a pen tester breaking into things, and then started Thinkst to build security products because I thought that would be a cool way to spend the rest of my life. But that's what we do. We're pretty happy with the company. Like, we've got really nice customers. We enjoy making things that people like, and we enjoy meeting cool people.
And they
Awesome.
enjoy.
That's Zane.
All right, fair enough. Hey, I'm Zane. So my background, I've been fortunate enough to be on many different sides of security. So I started out as a pen tester as well. Went over to Etsy in the early days of Etsy and was the first CISO there and built and ran the security program. Took a bunch of lessons learned out of defending the world's foremost yarn website and started Signal Sciences.
It's like yarn, not the acronym, but like yarn.
Yeah, not the strategic yarn supply. Absolutely. All right. It's very well protected in the early 2000s, 2010s. So took the lessons learned out of that, started Signal Sciences with my co-founders, built that for a number of years, and we sold that in 2020 now. And then for some foolish reason became a VC now. And so enjoying working with awesome founders right here, if it's in the same direction on your screen as my screen. It's going great.
Cool. Yeah, this is all just really a trap to get Haroon, who is famously one of my favorite polemicists in the space, and many of his polemics in written and video form are required reading for every person who joins our company. That's not a joke. It's actually true. Just those of you, watch the security products we deserve. Everyone's like, I wanted to work at a security company, and then I watched that video, and now I don't know anymore. And we're like, welcome to the company. And so. But that's why it's required.
I really thought that was a hopeful talk. Like, lots of people after that talk told me it was depressing, and I really thought it was a ray of hope.
I think most common interpretations of "you got what you deserve" in title form are not intrinsically optimistic. But anyway, I've learned a ton from both of these folks over the years, and I'm really, really excited to talk about this topic. It's something I think is really interesting. So I'm going to start it off, and this is me doing my best, media personality impression, but I'm going to start it off by just kind of recognizing that there's a lot of different kinds of entrepreneurship in security. It's one of the coolest things about it, that everything from I'm going to fly solo and have my own LLC and not work for the man, all the way to oh my god, I'm ringing the bell on NASDAQ, how did it come to this, and everything in between. And so yeah, I put this question out for honestly, probably both of you, maybe Zane first, but kind of what are the patterns on this spectrum, that you've seen work really well? Because you're more than anyone I know, you've exhibited all of parts of the spectrum throughout your life. So
yeah, look, I think the most important answer on any of that, there's no right answer and there's no wrong answer on this. I think the main case to avoid is just, and where it all goes wrong is where you mismatch with what you want to do with kind of how you build or fund the company that you end up doing, right? And so to give an example of that, it's for plenty of folks where, and I have no idea if I'm supposed to be saying this as a VC or not now, but run straight to VC funding when actually that's just not the style of business that they want to build and not the style of business that they would actually be successful doing and really enjoy. And I think, I think what's most important in this space, given how hard that it is, and we'll talk about a bunch of this, it's really, you know, work backwards from what your goal for your company actually is. And when you work back like 3 or 4 steps back from that is where you actually get to the decision on like, how should I fund this? But when you just put like funding, for example, above everything else, you can end up completely down the wrong path for what you want to do. So like find what you enjoy, build the company around that, and whatever style you choose, like that's great.
Mr. Meer.
Yeah, so I think much like Zane, I don't think there's a one answer for it. But one of the things that I think about when I think about what people should do in this space is, again, to steal a Ben Horowitz quote. Like I think lots of people go easily with follow your passion, and I like he gave this opening address at some point where he spoke about follow your contribution instead of following your passion. Like what are you good at that the world needs? And I think there's a bunch of that's necessary. I think security had a long period where a whole bunch of us were just following our passion, and lots of us had fun for a long time and didn't significantly move the ball forward. And I think there's a stage beyond that where you can find the sweet spot of what you enjoy doing, but what the world needs. And I think there's goodness in there.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. For my part, I try to spend a lot of time with early stage founders. Not even the people tend to call me when they start trying to raise VC, because I have a reputation in some parts of the world as being good at that, which means that basically people come to you after they've already made up their mind on everything, and you're like, let's take some steps back. Let's not just like figure out what order to drive down Sand Hill Road. Like, what do you really want? And so I think that, like, when I'm looking for people that I think will actually have a good time with this, because the whole point, you only have so many like minutes here on Earth. Like, do things that are meaningful to you. Like, it's like, that's really like what's better is like you look for like certain traits. I don't know how you guys do this, but like there's that person who, like, if they're in school, they love the project that they built in the project class more than they care about getting an A or doing the rest of their homework. It's like this crazy ownership mentality where they just want this thing to live and they don't really care about anything else besides the thing that they're doing. That's usually the first streak, because there has to be something like inside of you that you want to like exist in the world that's like in your head or in your heart. So I always look for that. And so if you're viewing this as some like, job ladder kind of thing, like maybe don't, because like it's going to suck so hard. There has to be something wrong with you, I think, to really want to start a company. And it's a great job. Like, it's a gift, and it's like, I'm happy that we live in a world of like ample, resources and ample capital that we can all take risks and stuff. Even if we're not going the crazy VC route, we still live in a somewhat, pampered universe. There's people out there who would do anything for a $100 Kiva loan, and like, and are full of potential. So I'm happy that we get to realize this potential as citizens of the developed world. But like, like, do they really want this to exist? And then also, like, are they looking for like personal growth? Because if they're really just like, I I hate my boss, I want to be my own boss, but like, those are different questions. Like, if you hate your boss, like, find a better boss. But if you need that structure and you want the guidance and you want the mentorship and stuff, and you want it to come from like a fairly well regulated job, like, good. If you want to be your boss, like, you have to kind of like inductively, well, then you have to be your boss's boss. Then you have to be your boss's boss. Like, are you sure you want to do that? If all you want to build is this really cool thing, if you kind of like play that forward, if you build like a whole company around it or something, eventually you're either not directly building the thing anymore, or you found somebody else to be your boss again. It's this like very dangerous realization. So I'm kind of just like looking for people who like are like, well, I've never really fit in anywhere. I've like never really fit in any one job. I really care about this stuff, and I don't really care where it goes. And, this will be an interesting, journey, and it's a random walk through, careers, and we'll see where it goes, so like, that's usually the like particular, deformity that I'm looking for when I try and figure out who to spend my time trying to help. And that's,
I think the passion bit just can't be overstated. I mean, that's just so important, right? Like, especially in security, or even just broader infrastructure. Like there are so many problems in there that seem so boring to other people, maybe call them normal people. And yet to all of us are like extremely exciting, and looking for people who are super passionate about some problem that seems boring to other folks is the way to go.
Yeah, I have one more little funny anecdote is like, I have a good friend who really wanted to start a company because a lot of his other friends had started companies, and he's a really sharp guy. I really like him. And he was definitely in like, I need to find an opportunity mode, like whatever the opportunity is. I want to build the biggest, bestest business as fast as possible, right? And so he's like, Ryan, I think I found it. I think I found what it is. All right. And I love this guy. He's a very good friend. And I'm like, okay, what's the business? And he's like, well, I'm gonna disrupt the casket industry. Caskets aren't sold properly online, and I think you could build like, whatever, away suitcases or Casper mattresses or Dollar Shave Club for caskets. And I'm like,
For CISOs?
oh no. Yeah, for CISOs. And so I'm like, okay, man, well, yeah, that might be a great business, but like, you understand, it's like it's a potentially 10-year endeavor. And you're going to be like the guy that all your friends know as the casket guy. And I don't know where Casket Con is held. It's probably pretty cool, maybe Transylvania. But like, are you ready to go to Casket Con every year too? And he's like, no, I'm not. So then he started a fintech, and it was better. That's the story.
Interestingly, it's one of the reasons why I always pitch for more ex-hackers or hackers to build companies. Because I think, like we keep complaining about the industry or the state of the industry, and if the only people starting companies are people who chose cyber because it's hot, then you're going to end up with a market full of people who build companies like that. And if there are people who genuinely love it and end up doing it, even when just in their spare time, like they've at least got a better shot at it.
That's
Totally.
like, you have to be willing to do it for free, do what you love. You never work a day in your life. Okay. Let's move on. Yeah. So, as Zane just wrote in the chat, this is like Twitch. You're supposed to tip him $5 for that. I think I never really watched Twitch, but I think that's how it works. Yeah, write questions in there and we'll try and go to yours. I guarantee they're better than mine. But this begins the harvesting of questions section. But we're gonna do some filler ones while we wait for you guys to do that. All right. But yeah, just use the Q&A thing. If you type stuff in the chat, it might not work and I might forget to look at it. All right. So we paid for the Zoom add-on, use the Q&A add-on. All right. Okay. So yeah, so I guess like this is maybe a follow-on, but yeah, just there's a lot of people who want to know about fundraising. They saw A16Z on your Zoom background, Zane. Like, should you go the VC route or not? I'll start with Haroon just to give Zane a little breathing room because he's got like answers that he's supposed to say.
So despite the fact that it turns out people think I am totally anti-VC funding, I'm not. I just don't think that it should be everyone's default. And that's not to say that I don't think people should make big companies that try to take on the world. I'm just increasingly not convinced that VC funding is the best way to get to that. And I think like one of the main reasons I like hackers to build companies is because I think that almost everything in company building can be hacked. And I
It's
think
a great way to put it. Yeah.
Like I think being a founder is largely just which things you hack on any given day. And so I'm always surprised at how many steps people take as laws of nature, laws of physics, when they're not. And one of them is funding, because certainly good or bad, it changes certain directions, or it makes certain directions more likely. And mainly my take on it is that, like Zane said earlier, if you take where you want to be and work backwards, maybe VC funding is the best route to get there. But most of the problems that I think young companies have aren't solved by what VCs bring. And I think that it's strange that most people think that that's the first step on their company building journey. And yes, we try to stand proud as the did not go that route, might actually survive and build a long-term company out of this.
There's a reason I consistently say Haroon is the smartest person in security, and it's it's answers like that. I mean, I just vehemently agree with everything that you just said. It's not like, it is one of those things where, don't take that as a given. Like, really step back and think about, what's the company that you want to build? What's the problem that you want to solve? What do you want that company to look like in 10 years? And by the way, a extremely valid answer to what do I want my company to look like in 10 years? The answer can be, I don't know, I sold it 9 years before that, So like, it is, there are a ton of answers to that question. And only a subset of those actually align with, I should do outside investment at all. And only a subset of those are, I should do venture capital style investment. And there are a bunch of other options along the way too. And all of them can lead to completely awesome companies.
Yeah, I mean, you have Haroon, you have like Dan Guido. There's just so many like great companies that are like, we just do it our way and whatever.
Totally.
I think one way to think about it is like, there's just so many great analogies in startups because no one knows what's going on, and so you just kind of map it to the physical world. That's the best thing that humans do when we have no idea what's up. And I've always been a fan of the spark versus the gasoline. Like VC is the gasoline, you are the spark. Like, you, the person, are the spark. And like, don't get too high on yourself, because like, when's the last time a spark kept somebody warm? But like, one of these things is the action and one is the reaction. So it's just like, if that's, and from a grass is greener perspective, if you've built, a great business, and you can build a great business, like, the point is to make money, not to spend VC money. And so if you're a smart person, like, figure out how to build a business that people will pay for. And that puts you in the best possible position to like pull a 1Password or something, and then just go and raise like God's own Series A or whatever, as an IPO form, if you want to. People ask me like, oh, are you gonna sell the company, to one of the horsemen of the apocalypse, or are you gonna IPO? And I'm like, the best way to have the option to do whatever you want is to build, what we at Dropbox used to call the GFB, which I don't know if I'm allowed to swear in my own Zoom, but it's a great effing business, and it's like optionality. Like, you can call it like pulling an App Dynamics, where you sell the night before the IPO for 2x the IPO price. You don't get that option if you haven't built the GFB, Right. So yeah, I don't know, but from a grass is greener perspective, like, if you've built a GFB, and it's like an LLC or an S corp, and you could just put it directly into your bank account, then like, God be with you, So good for you.
Totally
So, all right. Cool. So yeah, should we try a question?
Yeah, there's some great questions, and we're not going to hit all of them already, just time-wise.
Please keep them coming though. These are awesome.
Oh man. Oh God. The top one I really like.
Yeah, let's
from Amir, like, founding companies involves significant self-delusion. You've started a company at least once. What are things we should not be delusional about?
I can go, and this will like one of your previous comments, Haroon. Well, I'm going to kind of reuse it here, which is, it might sound negative, but it's actually meant as very positive. Like, I'm going to be, what's the thing to not be delusional about? How hard it is. Like, it is, I firmly believe this is by far the hardest thing in your career that you will do, like in your professional world, not your personal world, but like in your professional world, this is by far the hardest thing that you'll do. I mean, I managed to delude myself twice in my career progression on that. We're going from like a pen tester to a defender, and you're like, how hard can it possibly be? Like,
those people are losers.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, oh yeah, if you've ever been a defender, or a CISO, or anyone, they're like, yeah, it's pretty hard actually. And then, the same thing, being like a CISO and be like, how hard can it possibly be a vendor? Like, are you kidding me? And then you go become one, like,
all you do is eat the steak that you buy for me.
Yeah, exactly. It turns out it's the hardest thing you'll ever do in your career. But it can be extremely rewarding. And I don't mean like financially, I mean like emotionally and like fulfillment perspective, it can be extremely rewarding. And so that's the trait. That's why people do it.
Yeah, in terms of delusion versus non-delusional, to go in another direction. So there's the famous article about the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or, where like all useful things end up being ended. like you got to be delusional to some extent to step in and try it. Like you got to be slightly nuts. But there's a lot of things that you absolutely can't be delusional about. And so there's a whole bunch of like you build the product and then you hear the feedback. And you need the self-belief when you're building it that says, I'm going to try this thing, even though other people couldn't or tried and failed. But then you need to be non-delusional and really listening when you get feedback. And you need to try to convince a bunch of people to do this thing with you. And initially you running on hope. But then you need to be listening when people are saying, actually, they're breaking or whatever it is. So there's a lot of delusion as a necessary factor, but there's like nothing will make you meet reality like starting a company, right? Like that's just what it is. So yeah, it's a good mix of delusion and absolutely being honest with yourself. Like with our company, we list a bunch of things, and honesty with ourselves ranks super highly for all of the stuff. Like intellectual honesty. If you're not honest about stuff, I don't know how you'd build a company, like or not a meaningful one.
Yeah, there's this weird mix of like, you do need, like we used to call it, there's like the central dogma of molecular biology, which is like, DNA makes proteins, proteins make you. We used to call like the central arrogance of entrepreneurship, which is like, and you need it, which is like, because especially when you're starting a security company, because every vendor has every product and every product does everything the best with AI and whatever. And so you're like, I have this idea. Well, CrowdStrike has a module, Cisco bought that 4 years ago, and so you're like, it helps, to like, obviously have like a thing you're passionate about that, like was an open source project that got a lot of stars and stuff. There are ways to get that validation, but you still have to believe that like you can build a business and you can take the market and and like, it's just like, it gets easier when you realize that like, there's all these, like, it's all marketing, everyone says they do everything, and like the worst companies say the most, and so you get a little closer to the painting and you realize it's all just little dots, but there's that. And then I think it's, even as a founder, like you get, cognitive dissonance where you're like, it's so hard, it must have been worth it, or I've worked so hard, it must be succeeding, and like I was like meeting some like, seed stage founders yesterday, great guys. And I think they're so good at grinding that I'm like, you have no idea how many decisions you still have in front of you, and how this is the easiest time in the world to make a strategic change that will make the next 5 years of your life so much easier. Like, one good offsite that you as a little team could go on right now, could totally change, like, everything. And you might end up building a 10 times bigger company, 10 times faster. Like you might not get like divorced because it was really hard, like right now. And because you're so heads down trying to get to like 100K in ARR or something, that like you're really just like there's a time to reap and a time to sow, and like there's a time to be creative and a time to turn the crank. And you need to be able to balance both of these, and so I think it's just that the delusion of just like, it's like the horse from Animal Farm. He's like, I must work harder, like don't send yourself to the glue factory,
Yeah.
So like you need to be creative, and you need to not be delusional that like the market is only waiting for you. You need to be tough enough to make it there, but you need to be like self-aware and honest with yourself, as Haroon is saying, to get there the right way, if only because you don't want as much pain, like achievement without the pain is winning, so
Yeah.
all right, cool. Should we move on? Somebody else want to pick the next one? Can you guys see the UI that I can see?
Yeah,
it's like you press Q&A and then it shows you stuff.
Yeah, totally. How do you know it's time to make the jump when you have a product, an MVP, a customer? Like jumping from your job out into
yeah, it's everyone's got a startup idea in San Francisco. Yeah. I've heard not everybody is working on it full time because Google pays real good.
I'll give a very short answer to that one, which is like with my co-founders and I, when we were all still at Etsy together, and we would constantly be kind of like discussing ideas with each other and everything like that. And the short version of the answer here is like, when's it time to make the jump? It's going to be a very cliche sounding answer, but it was actually extremely true. It's when you know, you know. Like with everyone that we would keep iterating with each other and talking through, like basically the shortest way to say it was, over time, our interest declined in all of them until one day, one idea, like the interest only kept growing and growing and growing. And when you knew, you knew. And that's when we left FC and started the company. So like I said, I'll keep it short on that one. And even though it sounds cliche, it's extremely true. Like when you know, you know.
I want to say a weird take on that, which is, it's a half-baked thought, so I probably shouldn't skim it. Like the one thought that always scares me when I hear people wanting to build a product, or they have a product and they're pondering it, is you'll often hear people say something like, I've got this idea, it's great, but I can't do it at my current gig because I've got a full-time gig and I can't build enough conviction without leaving. So I'm going to quit and then I'm going to think about it. And the one thing that I feel there is, if you decide to be a founder, at least for the next 5 years, your life is going to be operating with that sort of distraction. Like you should be pretty comfortable with the fact that you can take things pretty far without saying, I need to clear everything so that I can think about whether I'm going to make this jump or not. Mostly, I think you can figure it out. You can get pretty far before you actually have to leave your day job.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I think this is, tying it back to the question on why does everybody like want to raise VC so much? It's because it is a lifeline. Like
Right.
People have expenses. Like I'm a big fan of like people in their like not just 22-year-olds should start companies. Like it's so painful, like trying to help a 22-year-old who doesn't know anything or doesn't know anybody and has no experience, no human capital, and just has a life that they can light on fire functionally. Because you're like, oh, it gets easier once you like have experience and know people, even if you get obligations and responsibilities and expenses and heaven forbid a Bay Area mortgage, And so so I think people they fetishize VC because it's like, well, as soon as I can like get that term sheet, I can tell my boss to stuff it,
Right.
and you're like, oh no, like, and that's why you started the company. That's why you raised from that person. Oh no, please don't, So
Don't
like
be running from something, be running to something.
Right, always, but also just don't run to like a C tier VC with an exploitative term sheet because they happen to be the one to inbound to you like a damn engineering recruiter or something, So like have a punctuation mark between things financially if you can, but at the very least, like get that validation from like friends. Like, one of the things that I always try to emphasize for people is that entrepreneurship is an apprenticeship business. It's not a guild. It's not a closed guild where you have to work your way up, but it helps so much to learn it from other people. And if you're on this Zoom, like ping one of the three of us if you have nobody else. And like maybe, Zane can compartmentalize on the term sheet factory and, human advice machine that he's always been for me. But it's just like, talk it through with somebody. Right? Like, don't just like wait for the money, because you have any idea how easy it is to do your first fundraise? Like when you've kind of done a little bit of preparation with people that have been through it before, it is 100 times easier to talk through it with a couple like semi-experienced people. Cause there's a massive pay it forward culture in much of the tech industry, including in security. There's so much pay it forward. Like I tell people that I'm paying it forward too. The guy that I'm paying it forward from is Zane or Haroon in many cases. Seriously. Like I call it out, it's like there are things that you like literally, shared with me that are like make files, where I've made them and passed them on,
And we have the same thing for all those that helped us, right? It's just
Yeah.
like it's continuously paying it forward. And yeah, I could not agree more with your point. For anyone on this call, it's like reach out to folks, start having conversations, learn from other folks. I mean, we all did.
Yeah, I think that thing is super. Two things that you mentioned are super underestimated. The one is, like, we've all mentioned how hard things are. In some ways, they're also easier than lots of people think. Like, get started and help will come. Start it and unless you completely insane, in which case you're used to being alone, like help will come. And the second thing is the paid forward, the help culture. To go back to my anti-VC rant, like the big pushes when people go the VC route are money or advice. And I'm firmly of the belief that lots of the advice doesn't have to come from there. There's enough founders, there's enough people who've been around who will help if you ask. It just normally doesn't look like, hey, mentor me. Like you've got to take some steps, you've got to do the work, and the community is pretty great.
Yeah, one of the things like there that I like, it's this massive epiphany a couple of years ago is that like, there's a balance when you have to be good at meeting people. If you're trying to start a company, even if you're fully employed and you don't devote a significant chunk of your week to meeting new people and like engaging with them and trying to get like ideas or advice or validation or early customers or something, like you have to force yourself to be an extrovert. I am not an extrovert. I am a huge introvert. I've just forced it for so many years that like I can play one on TV sometimes. And like you need to be a net importer of advice and help. And then like once you're doing that, like it gets so much easier. And so like just force yourself to do that. Really just force it. And then once you're doing that, you basically have to, if you show up and you're like, I'm a needy baby, help me, I don't know anything. On one extreme, people are gonna be like, oh my God, how did you get this meeting? I'm so busy. Like this person is not someone I want to help. But if you show up and you're like, here's my vision to dominate the universe, like sign up now, loser. Like, then they're gonna be like, I guess you don't need any help and I don't want to help you and you're a jerk, right? Or my favorite is the solo founder who just does the royal we constantly and there's no one else. And I'm just like, who hurt you, man? Like, what are you doing? You know? And so it's like you Louis the 14th with a Django app, you know?
We understand.
And so you have to be in the middle. You have to be like, you have to, most people who want to help you want to learn something from you and then help you, you know? Right. So like, give them like your perspective, give them your insight, tell them your story. Like, it's not just getting them emotionally invested. It's they're a curious person. And that's why they're a teacher, or at least you hope they are, you know? So it's that balance of be someone wants to help, and think about what that actually means, you know, but you need the help. You really do. You're dead. Otherwise you're completely dead. So, all right. Haroon, you want to pick the next one?
Mr. Lanzi with the next question. Most folks consider starting a company likely expect to have to know something about finance, something about building, managing a team. What's the most unexpected skills that it takes to be a good founder? So it's a great question. Like in touching the previous point, I want to say again, like I think these days it's a lot easier. Like I think 20 years ago, if you were starting a company, there were just so many unknowns that the stuff tripped you up. Like between all of the blogs that people have put out, all of the good books, the stuff that Y Combinator has done, like they've demystified lots of that stuff. And so for the most part, yeah, you kind of feel like you can put stuff together. The most unexpected thing I think for me, and again it's going to sound cliche, but like Doug Song is famous for saying with Duo Security, it's the team. Like I haven't seen anyone build a meaningful company without pointing out that the people you hire matter much more than anything else. Like the quality of the people that you end up working with will dominate over everything. And you can start off with good tech, but you'll quickly run into problems. You can start off with a good idea. And so almost more than anything else, I think you've got to be able to convince people to work with you. And that doesn't mean I think like Silicon Valley is famous for having Steve Jobs type founders, and yeah, I think the bottom line there is he could still convince people to work with him, and I think you seldom find a story of someone who worked closely with Jobs who doesn't say like it was terrible, ruined my marriage, ruined my life, I do it again because it was the best years of my life, and I think fundamentally. You don't certainly like Ryan. I'm much more of an introvert than most, and I don't think I would have signed up for now. What you're going for is people matter more than almost anything, and how you convince people to work with you is going to be the big thing. but I think that becomes a big part of it. Like if you're going to build anything, you need to convince people to come along and do it with you. Yeah, I'm keen to hear you guys' thoughts on it.
Totally. Yeah. Ryan?
Yeah. I mean, unexpected skills. Yeah, obviously, like just on it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Like if you can fill the rest of the clown car with people that you love being around, like you have such a better shot, because you have to basically like work backwards. Like my co-founder Abhishek is amazing, and he's not going to watch this, so I can say that. He'll blush otherwise, although he might be in the office. But he loves these like pre-mortem exercises. If you guys ever do these, where you just like assume that we've failed. How did we fail? And now like, let's work backwards and figure out like what, if any, concrete steps we should learn and mitigate, from. And you could do this as an individual if you're especially good at being honest with yourself, which is another useful skill, which hopefully is expected now. And so once you do that, like a lot of it is like, it stopped being fun, like the Beatles broke up because John and Paul were yelling at each other too much, not because the music wasn't good. Or, you can blame Yoko. I don't blame Yoko. And so like, it's like, you have to you have to optimize for not only for your own happiness and your own fulfillment, or at least good enough happiness and good enough fulfillment to keep going. But you also, it's like your own sanity. Like people always ask me like, why did you grow the company so slowly for the first couple of years? Because it's like, we had a lot of stuff to do, and it's like way easier to manage a handful of really smart people that you work well with than a bunch of other people. And the point is not to like make headcount go up on LinkedIn. It's to win, So like, it's just easier to manage. Like, it's like all the people who are realizing they don't need like Hadoop and big data in the cloud. They're like, 5 servers, if they're really good servers, like kick the crap out of your like, Gluster FS cluster or whatever, So it's the same thing in management. Management is just computers with people you love. So, all right. But yeah, that was an unexpected one. Just like putting together a great team that you actually really care about. One other thing that I was like, surprises people is their like founder composition. I think we had a question about that we were going to hit, which is like, what is the right, who should you work with and what should that look like? And there's a dogma that's like, it's like basically people that watch the A-Team too much. And you're like, you need an explosives person, and you need a safe cracking woman, and you need this and you need that. You need a sales guy, and then you need, the really awesome product person, and you need the designer. Don't forget the designer. People these days need a designer on the team. It's just like, no, you just need people that like work together really well. And there's also, especially early on when you're like, what do we even do? Having people that have a certain degree of like skill redundancy and then forcing yourself to go to all the same meetings makes it so much easier to get to consensus about what you're even seeing. You don't have like the engineer in the garage building the thing that no one wants, and then the like supposed sales product visionary taking meetings saying, it's got to do this, it's got to do this. Like, why isn't it doing this? I think that's probably killed at least half of startups, just that specific dynamic. So why don't you both be like a little blurry, stretch yourselves, and go to a lot of meetings, and then build on Mondays and Tuesdays, take meetings on Wednesdays and Thursdays, Friday, get beer and think creative stuff. I don't know, stuff like that. Like these kinds of setups work. And then also having a semi-redundant co-founder that you work really well with means that you can go on vacation. His name's Abhishek. I love him dearly.
Super important. We would like, when one of the 3 of us co-founders was on vacation, and if you replied to like anything on Slack, the other 2 would jump in and shout at you and be like, shut off Slack, you're on vacation. We don't want to see anything from you. And like actually enforcing vacation for folks, because it pays off for sure. Yeah. And yeah, to your point on like a team that you love. I mean, like my co-founders and I still talk to each other every day. And that's, 13 years on from when we started working together.
Yeah. Cool. So maybe I'll do the next one. So how much of this advice changes for someone building a services company versus a product company? Luckily, most of the advice has been so high level that it's all applicable. You wanted specific advice? I'm sorry. This was the generic webinar.
Yes.
A services company, bootstrap it.
Yeah, seriously, you'll make money faster.
Like, yeah, absolutely bootstrap it to start.
Yeah. Like you already know how to get paid for your labor. Just like learn to manage a client pipeline. Then, find people that can do what you can do and scale it up, is how my friends that are good at this have told me. Yeah, public markets hate services and hate services margins, which means VCs hate it. Because remember, VCs are not like, your customer. They're not your anything. They're just this weird conduit between public markets and your life. So they are something. They're my friend. But the point is, like, ultimately, like, there's a greater fool theory is a harsh way of putting it, but that's on Wikipedia at least, you know? So
Ryan, the real venture capital was the friends we made along the way.
I know, I knew that was good. That line had to come up at some point. But yeah, so yeah, just build a GFB, but build a great effing services business. And that's, you probably know how to do that.
Doesn't mean you can't take, by the way, it doesn't mean you can't take outside investment later, but just like, you can, you're afforded and just to like be very clear why I was saying that, like, you are afforded a luxury in services that you are often not afforded in product, which is that you can get revenue almost immediately. Take advantage of that incredible opportunity. That's the reason I say
the GFB thing that Ryan keeps mentioning is interesting, because like for us, we've used it as a guide for lots of things that go like, if we do this and if we build a great business, if we want to raise, we'll be able to. Like that thing that says, and it's this, it cuts across almost everything. If you look at it as a game that you're hacking, if you look at building a company as a series of hacks, there's a thing that says, well, okay, actually what matters is, can you build a great business? And even when it comes to raising, like, lots of people have questions on like, how do you get intros with VCs? How do you get this? How do you get that? If you build a great business, like you can do just about anything to VCs, and they'll come back to you because that's their business. Like build a good business. The
good ones are professionals.
Yeah, they can. And so like, what matters more than anything is not that you liked Mark Andreessen's tweet. What matters is that you build a great business. And if you do that, you'll be fine. And it's the same if you build a services business. Like, there's this whole stigma around it. If you manage to get a good product out of it, if you manage to build something that people want, that has margins, and you'll build a good product, you'll build a good company around it. Like I think people forget, build a good product, build a good company. It like solves everything else. Like if you can get that bit right, you're going to be fine.
Whenever we'd have candidates ask me the question of like, what's the goal for the company? Is it to IPO or to sell? And the answer was the same every single time. It's build a company that's capable of doing either.
Right.
Yeah. Like, optionality, baby.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the one thing I think that like you have to be careful of when you're building a services business, I think, is I've had plenty of friends that have been like, well, I'm building a services business, but it's really just a way to monetize my discovery process while I build a product or whatever, right? But like, and that's doable, but just understand that like building any business is hard and engrossing. And so you're going to be like, I want to make the number go up and to the right. It has to all be worth it to make the number go up and to the right. And when you're like, actually, I'm going to like wreck the number because I'm going to like start building a product, or even just thinking that you can do both at the same time, like, it's possible, but you have to like really try hard. All right. And you have to be like consistently honest with yourself. You know, are people buying from you because they love the way that you're solving the problem? Or are they buying with you because of the fundamental technology? You know, people paying you to solve their problems is the common thread, but like the means are really, really, really important. And so you have to kind of really be writing down the problems and the value, and like finding that like consistent problem or theme of problems that you can productize, right? Because fundamentally, like software, like computers do human stuff. That's like really what it does. Computers automate our work. God bless them. I'm a good programmer and not a very good worker. Although once I cut lawns for a whole summer for my village and got stung by a bee every week at the same house. But like the point is, if you're building a services business, like look for those opportunities, but like look for the kind of cluster of common problems. All right. And then build the software to make that easier. Take what you would have paid, or gotten paid as a services person. Like, it's a 100K engagement for me to, like fix your whatever Okta configuration or something. And then you're like, okay, well, fundamentally, the reason you're making the software is because, wow, everyone has these Okta configurations that can be fixed, and Okta has an API, and that's so wonderful. But it's, instead of it taking 3 months and 100K, you can do it in 3 hours and it takes 10K. So you're basically fundamentally putting yourself out of work, right? And that's attention. All right. So like, just kind of be aware of what you're doing here and whether it makes sense. All right. And same thing, honestly, for founders who are like, my first product will be whatever, but my ultimate vision is to whatever something else. And it's like, do you understand that like you're going to be so obsessed with making your opening move something that you can scale and getting that to 1 million, 10 million, 100 million in revenue? That like it's going to take like serious, like psychotic effort from you and your team. And you're going to have to be the person reminding them every day that you're doing this to break that momentum. And you might just get tired after 4 years and just want to like hope the plane lands. Because honestly, that's how it happens for some of us, So, and then you go on vacation, you feel better. All right.
There are
all right.
a ton of great questions in here. I was scrolling through.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why don't we try to like lightning round some of these and do like,
Yeah, we got 12 minutes.
Yeah.
If we go over, we probably have to pay more on Zoom. But we can do a sequel. If there's interest in a sequel, we can do like somebody make a domain name and say, I want a sequel.com or something, and we'll do a sequel. I want it to feel grassroots.
Yeah, that's the easy way to do it. Go register a domain. Yes.
All right. Who wants to pick the next one? You guys are doing a great job.
In the early stages, it's better to start with a diverse team or group of like-minded people.
Classic.
Yeah, I think this goes a little bit to Ryan's A-team question. Like I think early on, you're building a team for here's a group of people and we want to work on this problem. And I don't think you cherry picking for roles early on. If I'm honest, I think early on there's an amount of cohesion that's needed. And I think early on you don't want certainly until you put something out, you're going to need you're going to need everyone pulling in the same direction. Like and it again requires honesty, intellectual honesty to be able to question your assumptions. But early on, when you've got a small group, I certainly think you want to be pulling in the same direction. But I think that answer is going to be all over the map. I'm not sure how you define diversity. Next
it's
one.
really about figuring it out early on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whatever your secret cocktail is as a founder for figuring it out, whatever the group of people you need to figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. You grab the next one, Zane. Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, totally. I'm trying to find ones that I could give a short answer to rather than like these are all good ones. And they're like, oh, that's a 30-minute discussion. That's a 30-minute discussion. So apologies to any that I'm not getting about company. Okay, so here's a one. I want to hear how you all think about competition in security. It feels like every corner of security has at least half a dozen different companies. Is there any white space left in security? I would say my lightning round, that's another one that could be an hour discussion. So apologies.
Yeah.
Let me give the
each of us has written at least one blog post about this.
Oh, exactly, right? So like, look, the short answer there is don't be worried about competition. There's going to be competition no matter what you're doing. If there's no competitors to what you're doing, like you're doing something wrong. Like it's that simple. So don't be worried about there being competition. Like think about what are your strengths against the competition. And it's almost never going to be, if you're entering a market that already has other folks, it's almost never going to be you have more money or you have more like resources or in some way. It's hopefully going to be you have some insight that they're all missing. That you were actually a practitioner in this space where there are a bunch of folks who don't really understand it. They understand the problem, but they don't understand the solution. Or you've got an amazing network in security where they're just dialing for dollars with salespeople every day. Think about what is your unique advantage and press to that. I would really encourage you not to be looking for some area where there's no competition. There's always going to be competition. And if, like I said, if there isn't, like something is actually wrong, like do not be afraid of there being competition.
In terms of white space, I just have to say, like it's a one place where we're really lucky with security because so many things are terrible. Like there are so many things that are terrible that even products that are currently like just about anywhere you aim, the incumbents are really not doing that great a job. And one of the reasons why you should start a company is because maybe you figure out why they're doing such a terrible job. Like maybe there's good reasons for it. But really, I can't think of too many products that are unassailable in the space, or companies that are unassailable in the space. People don't use the stuff because most of it doesn't work and lots of it sucks. So there's lots of white space for doing stuff better.
Yeah, incumbents can't build. You can.
Yeah, no, it's like Haroon has done a good job of pointing out that like there's this interesting, I don't think it's like a deliberate, setup between like the big security companies and the venture capital ecosystem, but they basically outsource their R&D in the same way that like, a couple of years ago, Dell realized they didn't know how to make a computer anymore. They were largely a computer sticker company. Like the same thing may have happened elsewhere. And so like if that's the dynamic, then the whole point of the thing is, you're the cannon fodder for big companies if you take that cynical view, but it's not inaccurate if you follow the dollars. But my more hopeful take on some of this is that like, and this is sort of how I get like a moral basis for being in security. It's not just that unlike everybody else, we have bad guys to fight. Like it's actually wonderful. Like I used to do a lot of like data analysis and stuff. And it's like, those companies are, well, we need to produce insights for businesses to operate more efficiently. And you're like, okay, I guess, whatever. But there are bad guys trying to steal from people, like F them. It's so hard not to swear on Zoom. So there's that. And then like, didn't you want to like, stop the bad guys? Like it's like what you do when you're a kid. You play like cops and robbers, maybe if you're the robber, then you whatever black out. But my other point is that if you want to know, like, if you want to rule of thumb on like what security company to start, security is basically the side effect of other technological change. So like, and I have this like, phrase that we use in our company, which is like technology spreads because it's useful, not because it's safe. So something will take over the entire world. You could make a topical ChatGPT reference here, and people have no idea what it's going to do to education. They have no idea what it's going to do to whatever, right? And so security is basically a new thing happened. Everyone's using it or adopting it, whether it's in Microsoft Teams and it's against their will or whatever, and no one knows what it's going to interact with, and it's going to be adopted because it's useful. It sucks to write your term papers. It sucks to have to stay at home and never have a video meeting with your coworkers, maybe. And so these things will be adopted. How will they interact with everything else that exists? What was the person who was making it not thinking about, right? So just look at what's new, study its interactions with existing systems. You will find like the next great security company, and you won't even have to like copy anybody else. All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I think that's a wonderful moral basis. Like we are the cleanup crew for the rest of the technology industry. Hell yeah. So,
all right,
cool.
lightning round, Ryan.
I'm not good at lightning rounds, as you may have just realized. Let's see. Ooh. So yeah, there was a really good one I wanted to do. This is tough. Oh, when do you do stealth mode versus, and this whole concept of stealth mode, like that ickiness. I think it's really about like, do you have a marketing strategy yet? Or what does your marketing strategy look like? Because the wonderful thing about the security world, if you go and read like the market for silver bullets and stuff, is that like nobody really knows, necessarily like what tools and methodologies like work, right? So they find out, and people need to find out. And so they can either like go to Black Hat and like find the juggler who is most personable and buy their product, or they can like talk to their friends, right? And that's why there's so many wonderful like, security Slacks and stuff now, right? That's a great thing because it's people sharing their experiences. So, we did our first like $1 million thing, with a different name and a website that was one page. It didn't have any information on it. Why? Because people talk, and so like we were in stealth mode for almost 3 years. And it wasn't like because we're like, we don't want you to copy us. It was because we didn't have any other strategy for marketing the company. So we just tried to build good software, show it to people, work with them, collaborate with them, have them tell their friends. And that's largely still what we do. Frankly, it gets stuck, but it ends up being karmically decent. So, but so I would say like make noise when you have a reason to make noise. But like try and figure all this stuff out ahead of time. There's nothing sadder than a founder playing house and pretending to be more and to be farther along and to be bigger. And you hire a 30-person team and you spend your funding as fast as possible just so you can, convince yourself you've got it all figured out. Don't do that.
There was a point in there that you made, though, that I think is worth calling out, also just like by itself, which is I've come around completely on this, in that like, do not do stealth mode for competitive reasons anymore. Like I was firmly in that camp in the beginning of Signal Sciences, and I was completely wrong. Like it's that simple. Like, do not worry from the competitive side. The reality is, like, you're going to build a better product and a better company, or you're not. Having less info on your website for potential customers to see isn't going to change that. So be as open as you can in that sense, but also like Ryan's point there is spot on, which is for a lot of folks, it's also just a placeholder because they don't have the public facing marketing strategy in place yet. And then that's totally fine. But don't think that you're supposed to, or you need to do it from some competitive, secrecy angle, which I think for lots of us in security is like a natural tendency. Like that's certainly what we did. And honestly, I was totally wrong.
Oh man.
Before we get booted off, I'm going to do the last question just because I see a question from HD.
I was going to say that.
I was going to do that.
Is there
we
any
all have your
hope
question, man.
for B2B security business that doesn't gravitate towards large enterprise deals outside of channel heavy firms like Huntress or CSS1, who is doing well with mid-market? I can take it and like I can just talk about our data point. So this year we'll clear 15 million in ARR, and we all over the map with that stuff. Like we've got a pretty small initial selling point. We've still got a tiny sales team, like outside external sales is still 0 people. So we still do all internal sales, inbound sales. And for me, again, this comes back to 2 of the things that we spoke about. The one is it's a series of hacks. And the other is if you build something useful, mostly they'll come. Like one of the biggest things, and I'm seeing time, like for a long time, people building companies had this thing that said, if you build a better mousetrap, the world won't beat a path to your door. I largely think that's changing. Like I think solve the product, like build a product, and the product here being the whole product. Like if you build a tech thing and it's not solving distribution or not solving a bunch of other things, then you haven't built the product. But largely, I think there's no better time in history for it where you can have a small team, a good product, and you can actually live, you can actually thrive. So yeah, I think it's doable. I think until someone does it, it looks impossible and everyone says it's impossible. I'll hit again, especially except for Zane. When you see a lot of the VC noise, you see lots of people say stuff as if it's absolutely true until some company becomes the darling of Silicon Valley and does something different. And then everyone says, that's like, what a great idea. Like, why don't everybody do that?
They broke all the rules that I made up.
Yeah, exactly. And so mainly like, and again, it's why it's made for hacksaws. Make your thesis, test your thesis, go try it, and there's win in it.
Yep.
All right. I like literally have to, my next thing is a reference call. So that's cool. But I would rather do another half hour here, frankly. But all right, well, we'll do a sequel. One person said sequel. So that means we have to do it. But seriously, the point that I was making before about like, if you don't have anybody else to like reach out to or whatever, just like friend us on LinkedIn, like send us some LinkedIn. Haroon's really good at Twitter too. Go to Haroon on Twitter. I'm not as good at Twitter. It's like a really sad thing when you realize your best social network is LinkedIn. You really hate yourself for like the rest of your life. So super. All right. Well, thanks so much everybody for coming. This is really fun.
You.
Zane, Haroon, thank you.
Awesome.
Right. Thanks, folks.
See ya.